this video, we are going to be dissecting what information you can extract specifically from the dog's bark. What is your dog saying when he barks? There has been a whole bunch of scientific data talking about this, and that is what we're going to cover today. So if you're interested, make sure you keep watching. What's up, guys? It's Jenna with Dog Liaison, where I coach you on how to treat your dog's mental health needs. And on this channel, we break down scientific research in order to inform and educate us on how to train dogs. Now, today we are talking about what information you can extract from your dog's bark. What is being said or expressed when your dog barks to you? Now, there are a lot of articles and content on this topic, but much of that content actually looks at what you can see when the dog barks, which is to say, it relies on you to notice if the dog lifts their paw. It relies on you to notice, is the dog holding a ball in his mouth? It relies on you to notice external things, visible things from the dog that indicate what the dog is saying. But in this video, I want to look at specifically the bark and what you can hear out of the bark. So if you're interested, let's get started. Now, in this video, which talks about the history of dog barking and the evolution of dog barking, we talked about a study done by Dr. Sophia and Dr. Brenda McCowan. And we talked about how they were able to first establish in 2002 that dogs make different sounds depending on the context. Specifically, they found that harsh sounds like this one are reserved for contexts under which the dog is disturbed and are also longer in duration with more rapid repetition. So this would be example like if the dog is responding to the door knock or to a doorbell. While higher pitched sounds like this one are reserved for contexts under which the dog is lonely or distressed or the dog is playing. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, dogs bark in different contexts, they make different sounds. That's not groundbreaking stuff, Jenna. Totally hear you. We can figure that out just by listening to our own dogs at home. They make different sounds, different contexts. Totally get it. But in 2002, this was the first time that it had been proven, and it really worked as a foundation for a bunch of research to catapult off of. And that's what we've seen in the last 20 years. Probably the person who has committed the most time to studying dog barking specifically is Dr. Péter Pongrácz, which I'm probably butchering his name. I'm really sorry, but he's an ethologist out of Hungary. And he and his students and his colleagues have invested a lot of work. There's been a lot of data. And as a result of that 20 years worth of research, we have basically been able to establish three fundamental rules about communication, which is that within a bark, there are basically three categories of information that you can extract. One is that you can figure out physical traits about the dog. Two, you can figure out the inner state, the emotional state of the dog. And three, you can figure out the context under which the dog is facing. We're going to cover those three contexts. The first being physical traits. Now, it has been proven as of 2015 that dogs can extract from another dog's bark size, their age, and their gender, all from just hearing a bark. People are not going to be able to understand the dog's age or gender based off of just hearing a bark, but we are able to extract the dog's size off of just hearing it. We can insinuate this, and you can probably already guess where this is going. I mean, if you hear a bark walking down the street, your head automatically creates an image in your head of what that dog looks like, and so there's a natural size applied to it just based off of hearing it. Now, an idea that an animal can figure out what another animal's size is based off of just hearing them, which is a principle called motivational structural rules. And it was created by Eugene Morton, and I think it was like in the 70s. So this is not a new principle either. This is pretty widely accepted that animals will portray their size or characteristics of themselves, physical characteristics of themselves, within a vocal emission. Now, the second part of that rule, the second part of these motivational structural rules, is that it also can indicate the dog's emotional or inner state. Now, the inner state in this case could be how the dog's feeling, happy, sad, whatever. But it could also indicate if the dog is hungry or if the dog is looking for a place to go to the restroom or whatever. So we need to be studying, can we figure out the emotional state or the inner state of the dog based off of hearing a bark. To no one's surprise, yes, we can. First, dogs and humans alike seem to be able to understand pretty well when the other dog, the dog making the bark, is antagonistic in nature. When the bark is aggressive or when a bark is confrontational. Both dogs and humans respond to that appropriately to the situation. Then there is the lonely bark, which is to say that the dog is by himself and he is barking because he's in distress and he wants to be near company. It was first tested with other dogs. So they had a dog on the inside of a house and then they had the dog in the backyard with a person. The dog on the inside of the house would whine, whine, whine. The dog on the outside of the house that was with the person and for all intents and purposes content would not respond. The dog on the outside, the listener, heard the cries, heard the barks, heard the loneliness, but it didn't necessarily care. Or for all intents and purposes, it didn't respond. That listener dog ignored it. So that implies that the lonely bark really doesn't serve a function for other dogs. Because if it did serve a purpose for another dog and dogs didn't respond to it, it would go away. Right? The outcome would not be desirable, and so therefore they would stop doing it because it's not benefiting them in any way. Yet it's still there. So then they tested it on humans. And what they found was that not only can humans hear the sound and recognize that it's distress, and that even blind people or young kids were able to recognize this sound of a lonely dog as distress. But then they were also able to realize that the dog was found to be annoying. So what do? We respond to it. Thus, positively reinforcing the behavior and perpetuating the behavior through genetics. So what that means is that, arguably, the lonely bark serves the purpose for humans. That the reason it exists is because it's been positively reinforced by humans returning to the dog. Now, the humans return to the dog is arguably because they're most annoyed, right? And they just want the dog to shut up. But nevertheless, the dog is saying, I cried like this. I cried 15, 16 times. Mom came home. I feel better now. Thus, I need to bark into perpetuity. So to recap, we have understood that within one bark, you can contain the age of the dog, the gender of the dog, the size of the dog, how the dog is feeling, the emotional inner state of the dog. Next, we want to see, can we understand the context under which the dog is barking? And for this, we turn to looking at play bark. Again, play bark really is a defect. I mean, it's gone off the rockers of what its history is supposed to be doing. In fact, it's the complete opposite of what its history says it's supposed to do. That is, barking is supposed to be, according to the ancestors and the taxonomic relatives, barking is supposed to be confrontational or agonistic in nature, and yet dogs are doing it in play. So why are they doing it in play? How did this happen? How did we get to that point? Well, it was observed that humans can understand dog barking as play. We're able to hear the sound and go, that sounds play. It doesn't sound agonistic. It doesn't sound like the dog is going to eat me. And it doesn't sound like the dog is distressed. So we can understand that the higher pitched tone tends to be more playful in nature. Unfortunately, as it pertains to humans, where we sort of fall short is the specificity of the bark, of the context of the bark. We are notoriously not very good at listening to a bark and being able to go, oh, that dog is, trying to get another dog to play, or oh, that dog wants you to grab its ball, or oh, that dog is barking because he wants to go for a walk. We're notoriously really bad at noticing those things by just hearing it. We usually have to look at the other behavioral or the contextual clues to let us know what's going on. And that has been seen over and over and over again. But I'm going to argue, and this is completely me, but I'm going to argue that that is something that can be learned, that people can get better at distinguishing their dog's barks. And as we start to get better and more effective at that, then, maybe in a couple thousand years or so, we'll finally be able to figure out the context of barks just by listening to them. On the whole, we know that dogs don't necessarily need to bark at one another to communicate effectively between each other. And so it's reasonable to think that barking has started to perpetuate in the species because of humans and because of the human environment on the whole. And the reason it's important that people argue that point and believe that point is because it changes our outlook on dog barking. So many people want to just do a quick fix on shutting the dog up, and they just don't understand why their dog just barks at every little thing, and they just smack an e-collar on the dog or say no or whatever, and that completely discounts, it completely ignores the fact that that dog barks because of our species, because the fact that we domesticated them. Your dog is barking right now because of your species, and it might not be because of you specifically, but I hope that this video changes your perspective of dog barking on the whole. It may give you a little bit more insight into what's motivating, what's causing your dog to bark, what information he's trying to relay to you, what communication he feels is necessary when he's barking. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit like, consider subscribing for more nerdy content. If you're interested in checking out any of the resources, all of them are in the description box below. I encourage you to do a deep dive because this was just a general overview of the research. There's so much more that we didn't cover. And if you enjoy more of these science explained dog behavior, make sure you tell me in the comment section below. Give me suggestions on what you want me to cover in the future, and I'll see you guys soon.